Have you ever had a friend who made backhanded comments about your personality and appearance? Who silently competed with you, used you at their own convenience, and constantly made you question your reality? Yeah, me too. This is my story about how I realized that my best friend / business partner was a narcissist, and how I carefully removed her from my life. And before we hop into this video, I just want to first mention the fact that I have learned a lot about how I was equally playing a part in this toxic friendship. I ignored all of the many red flags that she so conveniently presented to me on a platter. I kept giving her the benefit of the doubt because I was still working on overcoming my people-pleasing tendencies, and because I assumed that everyone held similar values and morals as me, but clearly that was not the case. Thankfully, this entire experience proved to be a major blessing in disguise, and my hope is that it can help others from making the same mistakes that I did, or at the very least, help them see the reality of their own experience if you happen to find yourself in a similar situation too. We met a couple years before officially forming a friendship around the end of 2018 when we both started attending a creatives brunch gathering that took place every Sunday at a local coffee shop in our hometown. One morning, we both wound up there early and sat together until the rest of the group arrived. Before heading out, we made plans to meet back up at the same coffee shop later that week. I'm not gonna lie, I was a little overly excited about our plans to hang out because up until that point, my life revolved completely around my 2 back-to-back long-term romantic relationships. So this is my first opportunity to potentially have a girl best friend for the first time in my adult life at 29 years old. I share that detail so that you understand just how open I was to inviting her into my life. Absolutely no hesitation was involved whatsoever. Anyway, we ended up spending several hours at the coffee shop and shared all of our wildest goals and dreams with each other. This was around the same time that I was starting my career in the healing arts and coming up with creative ways in which I could help others heal from their painful past experiences and become healthier, more fulfilled versions of themselves, which happened to be the common denominator that drew us together to finally hang out and get to know one another. One thing that really stuck out to me during our first hangout was when she shared that all of her previous business partners and collaborations stole from her and screwed her over. And as someone who always used to assume the best of others, I didn't really question it and just looked past that piece of information. As I shared in a previous video titled Chasing My Dreams Changed My Life, I kept trying to get my new business off the ground in many different ways. It wasn't until months later, when my plans at hosting a women's circle fell through, that this ex-friend of mine suggested that we collaborate. I brought her all of my plans from my many failed attempts of one-on-one work, a group program, and finally, the women's circle. We ended up rebranding the entire thing and launched it as a 3-month program. Unfortunately, it didn't end up working out since all of the women who were interested in attending weren't able to commit to the time required, which is when I suggested, why don't we just host a weekend retreat? Having already attended a few of them myself, I had a pretty good understanding of what it would require to run one. And considering I already had an entire syllabus of wisdom to teach, and she had an entire community of women who were primed and ready for this new level of transformation, as well as the ability to financially back the Airbnb, it was a no-brainer that we had finally found the perfect combination of ingredients for success, and ended up selling out the retreat to 4 women by the end of June. Fast forward to mid-July, I kept checking our shared Google Doc to see if she added our workshops yet, as I had already uploaded an entire syllabus of 8 workshops myself. She didn't end up adding anything to our document until the day before our retreat, and she only contributed 1 additional workshop and changed a part of one that I had already created. I surprisingly wasn't super upset about her only contributing the 1 workshop, considering the fact that I knew that we already had a full-bodied experience to help the women transform based off of what I had already created. In fact, I was super grateful that she had the financial ability to rent out such a beautiful Airbnb on the lake with a private beach in the backyard, as well as a community of women who were totally interested in attending, so I felt like we were both contributing in a major way. However, as soon as we got to the retreat, and the first workshop was about to begin, she pulled me aside and decided all on her own that she would teach the first workshop, I would teach the second one, and then we'd switch back and forth teaching all the rest of them. I was so confused because I had just spent the last 9 months preparing everything that I was about to teach, and now she was going to take half of what I prepared and write it off as her own. And even though I had been working really hard on overcoming my people-pleasing tendencies and setting healthier boundaries, I was still very much afraid of conflict and making people upset. So I bit my tongue and told myself that it would be fine, even though in the back of my mind I knew that it wasn't. She taught the first workshop and read all of my notes word for word, yet still didn't entirely explain them correctly. I breathed through the discomfort and decided, well, if she screws these workshops up, at least it'll be pretty obvious to the attendees that she didn't know what she was talking about. Towards the end of each workshop, she'd look over at me and ask, is there anything that you would like to add? Which is where I'd then have to clarify the things that she was misinterpreting, because I was still very much at that retreat to help those women who invested in themselves, even though I was seething with anger. Once she got around to teaching the workshop that she contributed, it was clear to all of us, including herself, that she had no idea what she was even talking about. Thankfully, the women who attended already had an established relationship with her, so they didn't seem too bothered, so I brushed it off and remained grateful that I was lucky enough to be there and share what I could with them when it was my turn to teach. After all was said and done, the retreat turned out to have been a success, and all of the women who attended were super grateful for everything that they received during our time together. I left that weekend feeling like I finally discovered exactly what I came here to do, and I was ready to host more. Fast forward a couple of weeks, I told this ex-friend of mine that we should start planning the next one, considering it was such a huge hit. She seemed extremely hesitant and kept giving me all these random excuses as to why we shouldn't do another one. I was so confused because not only was the retreat a success, but we even received handwritten cards from one of the attendees thanking us for helping her save her marriage. It couldn't be more obvious to me that it was exactly the kind of work that we were supposed to be doing. I couldn't understand why, for the life of her, she didn't want to host another one. As soon as I stopped trying to pull teeth to get her to come around and see my point of view on it, she randomly reached out one day and said, "I think you're right, let's plan our next retreat." And so we launched our second one and sold it out within about a month to 6 women this time that was set to take place in October of that same year. We ended up hosting pretty much the exact same retreat, only the vibes were different since it was an entirely new group of women who attended. Amidst all the planning in August and the eventual hosting of the retreat in October, this ex-friend who referred to me as her best friend failed to mention that she had planned and booked her own retreat in Sedona for the following spring, despite the fact that it was a shared dream that we had initially talked about doing together way before we even hosted our first retreat. Not only did she not mention anything to me during her entire planning process, but she didn't say anything about it at all. I ended up finding out through a Facebook post on the day that she launched it to start filling up spaces. When I confronted her about it and asked her why she didn't mention it to me, she just said, "I just feel like it's important that we still do our own things separate from one another," and just left it at that. By this point, I thought to myself, I need to start focusing on my own career path instead of trying to keep this whole partnership going, since she clearly doesn't want to involve me in her plans. And so I decided to host an intuition retreat in Joshua Tree in January of 2020, since that's where I had the most incredible spiritual experience when I attended my first retreat, and I wanted to share the magic of that beautiful desert with more people. It wasn't until about a month later, when my ex-friend learned that I was planning my own retreat, that she suddenly took it upon herself to begrudgingly invite me to hers, and she said, "I don't really have anything for you to do there, but if you want to come take photos to document it, you can." With which I replied, "If you'd like to come to my retreat, you're welcome to instruct yoga each of the 3 mornings. Even though deep down I still felt slighted by this whole experience, I just kept giving her the benefit of the doubt anyway. As time went on, she kept filling me with doubt and fear about my own retreat, and telling me that no one would want to spend that kind of money around Christmas or take the time off from work, and just kept doing everything in her power to deflate my confidence so that I wouldn't bother promoting it. Then when her Sedona retreat sold out, she didn't even tell me. And again, I found it out in a post on Facebook. When I asked her why she didn't tell me, her response was, "I didn't want you to feel bad or jealous." And I said, "Why would you think that? Your success proves to me that I can succeed too." Which to me was totally weird that she thought that way, because I was genuinely excited for her, even after the fact that she planned it without me after we had talked about doing it together. None of these instances really deterred me from trying to create more collaborations with her, and so I kept suggesting new ideas for future retreats for us to work on together, but she insisted that we do our own thing the following year. Once my retreat rolled around, which by the way, I ended up losing a ton of money on it because I totally stopped promoting it due to feeling insecure. Touché, girl, touché. And I only had 1 attendee. Despite those details, it was actually a really beautiful retreat, and I was and still am extremely proud of creating and hosting it all by myself, including cooking a bunch of vegan meals from scratch to last the entire weekend, which I had never cooked before. Everything ran smoothly and on schedule, and both my attendee and ex-friend told me that they had an amazing time. After the attendee left for home, I still had another few days planned for my ex-friend and I to go car camping in Death Valley. On our way there, she said, "I noticed you didn't print out any of the notes for us. I feel like that would have been better." All I thought to myself was, yeah, that was so you can't take credit for any more of my work. It was a very intentional choice on my part, and I replied, "Well, I told you guys that you were welcome to take notes. That's why I gave you those cute journals." By the time we made it to our campsite in the desolate desert, suddenly she was singing an entirely different tune. Suddenly, she was coming around to the idea of hosting more retreats together, and even got out the calendar on her phone as she started suggesting dates for each one. I kept my composure, but by this point I really started to see through her, and I was pretty sure that she was just hoping that I'd add my brand new teachings into the next batch of retreats so that she could pass those off as her own too. Regardless, I knew that I wanted to host more, so I silently decided to myself that I would not import any of my new teachings into the shared Google Doc and agreed to start planning our next batch of retreats. As soon as we got back from our trip to California, we sat down and made a solid plan to host 2 in New York and 1 in the Smoky Mountains. We booked all of our Airbnbs and launched them right away. Within a week or 2, we actually started filling up one of our New York retreats and came close to selling it out until suddenly the pandemic hit during the global outbreak of COVID-19. Within the matter of a couple of days, one of our Airbnb hosts sent our deposit back and canceled both of our bookings in New York, which led us to refunding all of the women who had already signed up to join us. And by the following week, we got our deposit back from the Smoky Mountains Airbnb host as well, leaving us back at square one. Still determined to find a way to help people heal and become the best versions of themselves, I went to her with the idea of offering it online, knowing that as the world around us was shutting down, people needed this work now more than ever. At first, she was completely turned off by the idea, which after a few days led me to giving up on the idea altogether. Then about a week later, she reached out to me and said, "I've given it more thought. I think that we should do it. Let's offer it online." We got together the following day and immediately started planning out the entire online course and how to go about presenting it so that people would be able to complete it at their own pace. A few days after that, I mentioned that I was considering including astrological energy updates and possibly pulling a card for each woman that joins, with which she immediately replied with, "We should do it together." Mind you, after hosting that very first retreat the previous July, she didn't share a single project or plan with me ever again until it was shared publicly. And not only that, but her transition in navigating the pandemic and taking her yoga studio online was pretty damn near seamless. She already had over 20 women invested in it within less than 2 weeks, and was bragging to me about how she was going to make over $1,000 a month from just that alone, on top of her many courses and offerings that she kept rolling out every few weeks. It felt like all she was trying to do at that point was control my every move. She kept putting off our project until the very last minute, after all her projects were finished and running smoothly. My livelihood depended on getting this online course off the ground, because all my photography jobs, except for one, got pushed back 1 to 2 years due to the pandemic, and I was making very little off of psychic readings since they weren't my main focus right then. All of this turmoil started to jog my memory about the first 2 retreats that we did together, and how she waited at least 2 weeks before giving me my half of the pay. Even with all the anger coming up for me during this exchange, I still went ahead and proceeded forward anyway, still clearly ignoring all the red flags that she kept waving in my face. Within about a week of this conversation and my frustrating observations, she called me one morning at the beginning of April and decided to back out of creating the online course. She told me that she didn't want to create the course together, but if I wanted to continue to create it without her, that she would fully support me. She admitted to the fact that she literally copied and pasted that one workshop that she contributed to our retreat document from a women's empowerment course that she took a couple months before hosting our first retreat together. And I can't say I was surprised, considering myself and all the attendees at both of our retreats were extremely confused as to what she was trying to teach us. She literally had no idea what she was talking about because it wasn't even her own workshop. She then went on to tell me that she didn't feel like she really had anything to contribute to this project, and that she would rather take the time reassessing her direction in life and in business. And so, still having this deep urge to help people heal, I decided to keep trucking along with my plans and immediately got to work on creating the course myself. Only a handful of days went by before she called me again and basically tore me apart in every conceivable way. She started off the conversation by telling me that she had read back through all of the notes in our shared Google Doc and that she resonated with everything that she added to it, but didn't resonate with anything I had contributed. Again, she literally copied and pasted that one workshop from someone else's online course. At the time, it felt like daggers to my heart because I put my entire soul into that work, and hearing her tear it apart felt like a personal attack. She then went on to tell me that I'm too edgy and rebellious, and that I'm too esoteric and spirit-related. She also told me that I stole her spotlight during our retreats because she didn't feel as wise and intuitive as me, and that it didn't make any sense for us to be working together. By this point of the conversation, well, it was basically just her yelling at me through the phone. All it felt like was the last year of our partnership was a total lie and illusion, and it felt like she completely betrayed my trust. What I learned that day was once you stop giving a narcissist what they want, their true colors come out. And I'm pretty sure the only reason she decided to back out of doing the online course together was for the fact that we were going to have to film our own workshops and she only had one to contribute and wouldn't be able to steal my work and pose it as her own. I just want to mention quickly again that I was still very much a people pleaser, and even after all was said and done, I still, to some degree, was hoping, wishing, and praying that we could reconcile our relationship because I actually really loved and cared about this girl. And so after a couple of weeks passed and my anger subsided, I tried reaching back out to her to see how she was doing. Days went by before she returned my phone call, and slowly but surely this turned into a very regular pattern. Me reaching out through calls and texts, and not hearing back from her for at least 2 days. Then when we finally did talk, she'd spend the entire time talking about how excited she was about her own projects, and never asking me once about how my online course was going. And I finally started opening my eyes to just how dismissive she was towards me. The following month, she opened up a little bit more about why she didn't want to work together, and basically told me that she was jealous of how I was able to keep people's attentions at our retreats and even on my own online platforms, and how it made her upset that I knew more than her. In my mind, I thought, wouldn't you want to be business partners with someone who's more proficient in things that may not yet be your strong suit? There were things that she was really good at that I was still mastering, so I thought it made total sense to be partnered up so that we could both learn from each other. But I guess that's not possible when you're linked up with someone who's in constant competition with you and needs to be the center of attention 100% of the time. Eventually, we ended up hanging out together in real life and went camping with a mutual friend. The two of them hadn't seen or spoke to each other in quite a long time, considering that the world had been shut down for a few months at that point. So I spent a decent amount of our camping trip doing my own thing and relaxing in my hammock by the water. The following morning, after this ex-friend of mine left, our mutual friend said that she told her that she gave me our retreat. I was so taken aback by this. Not only did I create all but one of our workshops, but I also planned out all the schedules, shot all of the photography for memory's sake and for marketing our future retreats, and gave 30-minute personal readings for each individual attendee to help them integrate everything that they learned throughout our weekend together, which takes an incredible amount of energy just to do one reading alone. So to tell our friend that she gave me our retreat was an absolute slap in the face. I noticed after this camping trip that she stopped liking photos that I tagged her in and no longer interacted with any of my Facebook live streams and YouTube videos, which at the time was unusual behavior on her part. Anytime we actually did talk on the phone, she'd spend the majority of the conversation acting super jealous and angry towards me for hanging out with other people, especially once I started branching out and collaborating with others in the spiritual community, despite the fact that I still made every attempt to collaborate with her and even invited her to do live streams in my Facebook group to promote her own work, and yet she never once invited me to be a part of anything with her. She'd constantly get upset that my YouTube channel was slowly growing and would call me every Wednesday night and say, "Oh my god, I can't believe that your video already has this amount of views and this amount of likes and you have this many subscribers. How come you're getting so much attention and my channel isn't even growing?" Mind you, every time I started doing something, it was only a matter of time until she started doing it too. I started a Facebook group, so she started a Facebook group. I started doing pick-a-card readings, she started doing pick-a-card readings. I started a YouTube channel, she started a YouTube channel. Like, maybe if you actually followed your own intuition instead of ripping off every single one of my ideas, something might actually work out for you. I swear, after the third or fourth week of this in a row, I started to think that she had a full-blown spreadsheet on her laptop tracking the performance of every single thing that I ever posted online. And honestly, she's probably still keeping track. There were days when she'd call me up and tell me that she had just spent hours scrolling through my Instagram again and looking at all of my old photos. She'd go on and on about how she wished that she was as pretty as me, as cool as me, and how she wished that people liked her as much as they liked me. And this should go without saying, but that's not normal friend behavior. That's like obsessive, stalker, jealous vibes. And it always creeped me out whenever she'd tell me stuff like that. It's one thing to check out someone's profile who you've just met in order to gauge whether or not they seem like a decent human, and a totally different ballpark to carefully study and sift through a decade's worth of someone's life. And this was like every few weeks that she would scroll through my stuff, even my old website for my business. After a while, she would always try to get me to second guess everything that I was doing and fill me with doubt whenever it came to the things that I was wearing, my creative expression, the projects I was working on, the new friendships that I was making, and basically tried to micromanage everything I was doing in order to keep me small and to feel like I was beneath her. For instance, if I actually shared a new idea with her, she would immediately say, "No, I don't really see you doing that. I mean, I could pull something off like that, but not you." in order to talk me out of doing it so that she could turn around and do it before me. It was her way of demotivating me so that I would feel too discouraged to do the things that I actually wanted to do. And every time I tried to resolve things between us that summer, she would tell me that she was still too raw from the situation that happened back in April, which was extremely confusing since she was the one who ended our working relationship and ignored me every time I tried to get together to hang out as friends. I started noticing that she only reached out to me when she wanted me to tune into spirit to bring through guidance and advice for her about her own life, or when she wanted to know what I was up to so that she could gain intel on the things that I was working on. I remember this one day that she called me and brought up 2 specific instances that were both incredibly embarrassing and mortifying. When I asked her what made her bring those up, she said, "Oh, I just thought it was really funny." And I replied, "There's literally nothing funny about those things, and you knew that it was going to trigger me." She fell silent for a few moments, then completely changed the subject. After a while, I knew for a fact something was off. I could just feel it. I finally reached a point around mid-July where I couldn't take any more of her judgment and backhanded comments, so I naturally started distancing myself from her until communication became almost radio silent. On October 26, 2020, we met up for the first time in months to try and clear the air, which essentially turned into her making up a bunch of lame excuses for her poor actions and behavior instead of taking accountability. She openly admitted to the fact that she was jealous of me and tried to sweep everything under the rug by emphasizing random funny memories and experiences that we shared together early on in our relationship, while barely grazing the surface of all the conflicts that had taken place throughout it. She got mad at me for unsubscribing from her email newsletter, and honestly by that point I found her emails to be incredibly triggering since she was always preaching things that she herself didn't even practice, yet wanted everyone to see her as the expert and spiritual guru. The only thing this meeting did was solidify for me just how absolutely delusional she was, and the fact that I could never trust her again. By the time I got back home, I decided I would not be attending a retreat in Sedona, which got pushed back to the following year due to COVID, and so I just continued maintaining my distance. I didn't really hear much from her over the next few months, nor did I even attempt to reach out to her either. And by the end of the year, I never heard from her again. That was, of course, until a few days into February, when she saw that I was in Sedona, documenting a retreat for a well-renowned spiritual teacher. The second I saw her text pop up on the screen that said something along the lines of, "Hey, I see you're in Arizona, how are you?" I knew she was only reaching out because this particular spiritual leader has a pretty big following, and she just wanted to use me to get through to them. Her tactics were way too obvious to me by then, so I just kept ignoring every attempt she made to try and get a hold of me. After about 2.5 weeks later and multiple missed calls and texts, I realized that she wasn't going to give up without a fight, so I finally called her back. This time, I didn't hold back and finally spoke my full, unfiltered truth. I told her that I knew that she was only using me for what she could gain out of a connection with me, and that I lost all trust for her. I set very clear boundaries and told her not to contact me again, and if at some point in the future I decided that I wanted to open the door to a friendship with her again, that I would be the one to reach out to her first. All I can remember is her fake crying and trying to plead with me to give her another chance. But I'd been there before. She reminded me of my abusive ex who would suddenly become the victim and try to gain my sympathy. But unfortunately for her, that sympathy ran out a long time ago. About 4 months later, a friend of mine reached out asking for business advice, and I was so excited to hear that she not only quit her soul-sucking job that she absolutely hated, but she was also launching her very own retreat facility. Her and I actually met through working for that company that she finally left, and I even shot her wedding and other special milestones, did readings for her, and she even came to my ex-friend and I's second retreat. So hearing all of this wonderful news about her transformation really invigorated me, and confirmed that I was indeed on the right path of helping people finally get in deeper touch with themselves on a soul level. Within a few minutes of our conversation, she shared, "So-and-so reached out to me," and all I thought was, of course she did. She can smell an opportunity to ride on people's coattails from a mile away. But instead I just said, "That's cool, just be careful and follow your intuition with that one." I had actually shared this entire story with her almost exactly 1 year prior to this conversation, with which she shared a similar story that happened between her and a friend when they went into business together years ago. I wasn't sure if she remembered everything I told her about this ex-friend of mine or not, but I knew intuitively that if I said too much or tried to convince her that she was bad news bears, I would be the one to look like the a-hole. And so I just left it at that. Follow your intuition. I knew that her and I's relationship was about to end after that video call, not because I wanted it to, but because I knew I couldn't ever be connected to that ex-friend ever again. And just as I figured, they went on to forming their own working relationship together right after that. The following year, in June of 2022, almost a year and a half since I cut contact with my ex-friend, I randomly received a 5-page handwritten letter from her, regurgitating the exact same energy and excuses that she had the day I ended our friendship. The letter was full of gaslighting and basically tried to manipulate me into thinking that the things that happened within our relationship weren't that big of a deal. She blamed the external for all of her actions and words and chalked up our falling out to miscommunication and told me that I was throwing our friendship away for absolutely nothing. She yet again brought up all of the good times that we had together, as if I'd just focus on those few instances and let go of all the horrible ways that she treated me, then ended the letter by telling me to reach out to her when I was ready. Luckily, I was already burning my old junk mail that night, so I literally burned the letter as soon as I finished reading it. And the only thing that letter did was confirm that I had made the right choice, and that she hadn't done a lick of reflection, inner healing, or growth on her end since the last time that we spoke. I'm pretty sure the only reason that she reached out to me when she did was because I had been consistently showing up on this channel for a few months into creating these kinds of visual stories. So she must have seen something within me that she wanted, since it's pretty obvious that she's an opportunist and conveniently places herself in people's lives whenever it most benefits her. Within less than 6 months from the day I received that letter, I ended up removing every single person from my life that was connected to her because I was so sick and tired of people playing both sides of the fence. Even after sharing everything that transpired between us, all of our mutual friends still didn't see anything wrong with the relationship. I knew I couldn't trust any of them anymore, for the sole fact that I would explicitly ask them not to share any of my business with her, and how I also didn't want to hear or know anything about her either. Yet every time I talked to any of our mutual friends, they'd immediately update me on every single thing that was going on in her life, so I knew that they were doing the exact same thing to me when they saw her too. At the end of the day, the only reason that she pretended to be my friend was so that she could steal all of my ideas and intellectual property in order to write it all off as her own. I'm sure she never thought I'd speak up on my own behalf, but I was just spending these last few years healing, growing, and transforming, which is something that she's never done, despite calling herself a healer. She literally kept telling me exactly who she was the entire time, and even though I questioned our friendship ever since we hosted that first retreat together, I just kept ignoring my intuition. It wasn't until looking back through all of my old journals when I realized just how calculated her interactions were with me from the very beginning. Having all the facts laid out from start to finish, it's extremely obvious to me now that she was carefully performing psychological gymnastics on me in order to deflate my confidence so that she could take whatever she wanted from me and run. It's incredibly disturbing the lengths that this girl will go in order to stay ahead of her perceived competition. It's clear now that she wasn't the victim in her old business dealings as she shared with me the first day that we hung out. She was the one who stole from them and took credit for all of their hard work. And she crafted all those elaborate stories in order to gain my trust so I'd reveal all the cards in my hand to her. I know this not just from my own experience, but I watched her do it to other people too while she was still in my life. She's always been an extremely transactional person. It just took me way too long to finally realize it. Something else that's really interesting is that she told me on numerous occasions that she was a bully in high school. Like, why I didn't take this as a sign to run as far away from her as possible is still beyond me. But I can assure you that anyone who's ever been a bully at any point throughout their life will have required a ton of inner work in order to outgrow that behavior, and clearly this girl did not. Every time we worked on something together, she'd build me up and talk about how awesome our ideas were. Then the second I worked on something by myself, she'd find every reason to tear it apart, including my confidence. In her eyes, if she wasn't the one doing the thing, then no one was going to do it. It probably goes without saying, but the only reason that she kept excluding me from her plans was so that she could make all of the money off of my ideas after discarding me once she got what she wanted. This experience taught me the importance of getting everything in writing. No matter what kind of collaboration that you agree to, always have a contract in place, even if you've known the person since birth or it's your family. Anytime money, intellectual property, or even the exchange of goods or services are involved, things can get messy very easily. And the only kind of person who will ever give you a hard time about having a contract is the exact kind of person that you can expect to have issues with later on down the road. This taught me that not everyone with a spiritual-based business actually has good intentions. Her concern was never about helping people. It was about keeping up a pristine public image while simultaneously spending her time behind the scenes making fun of other people's misfortunes. She doesn't care about making a positive impact. She only cares about filling up her own pockets regardless of how she obtains the money. She spends all of her time trying to convince people that she has all the answers, yet has never done any inner work herself whatsoever. She preaches about helping small businesses grow while simultaneously doing everything in her power to eliminate competition. She's even gone as far as getting different people to spy on other yoga studios in the area to gain intel in order to maintain the upper hand. She feels entitled to other people's success without ever having to lift a finger or putting in any work to achieve it for herself. The only reason I didn't remove her from my life sooner was for the sole fact that back then I always gave people the benefit of the doubt, along with a million chances to show me their true colors before I finally accepted that they didn't have good intentions towards me. She never had anyone's best interests at heart. In her world, she doesn't see people as her friends, but rather a means to an end. She steps on whoever she wants in order to gain power, status, and leadership, And instead of working on herself, she just drags everyone else down to her level. Whoever doesn't follow her personal agenda automatically becomes an enemy. And she'll do anything it takes to turn everyone else against them too. The hilarious thing is that the only enemy she really has is the truth. She dragged my name through the mud, tried to ruin my reputation, and turned an entire community against me because she was so insecure with herself and saw my existence as a threat. After a while, I decided, you know what, I'm just gonna let her talk and spread false rumors about me. All of the projections that she made about her past business partners were a direct reflection of herself and the things that she did to them. I decided it was best to let her dig her own grave because that's exactly what she did. I never had to lift a finger in retaliating or try to get people to see that she was lying. Because people who lie tell so many of them that after a while they can't keep their own story straight. And honestly, the fact that everyone was so quick to believe her and take her side after knowing me just showed me that 1, clearly there was some part of them hoping that the lies were true, which only speaks volumes about how they already felt about me deep down. And 2, none of those people have good judgment or discernment anyway, and I don't have space in my life for that messy behavior. The sad thing is that there's a decent probability that she'll never learn her lesson because she's way too focused on competing with everyone that she feels threatened by. So none of her energy actually goes towards herself and her own growth journey, which only takes her further off of her own path. The best revenge in this kind of scenario is to cut contact with every single person connected to the narcissist, heal yourself in private, and move on living your best life. Because eventually the truth always comes out. Believe it or not, I'm actually extremely grateful that I got to learn all these difficult lessons through this experience because it actually created one of the biggest opportunities for me to grow and transform on such a deep spiritual level, which led me to finally embodying my authenticity, living in complete alignment with my truth, and sharing my story so that others don't get fooled by people just like her. She may have thought that she destroyed me, but all she really did was challenge me to become even stronger. The lesson in all of this is to take people at face value and recognize their actions over the things that they say. Rather than give them 100 chances to prove that they don't have the best intentions for you, let them go as soon as they show you who they really are. I saw a quote recently that said, "Happy people aren't hating, and hating people aren't happy." When a friend gets upset or tries to downplay your accomplishments, then that is a clear sign that they are jealous of you. And that's not a real friend. Life isn't a competition, but jealous people are notorious for making it one. Whether your friend openly admits their jealousy or they're just simply showing signs of it, it's best to remove them from your life as quickly and discreetly as possible. Because people who act out of jealousy are insecure within themselves and don't see their own inherent worth or value. Which means that if we keep these kinds of people in our lives, they'll do everything in their power to try to undermine your confidence and fill you with doubt so that eventually you start to shut off the very parts of yourself that led you to your success in the first place. Real genuine friends want the best for you. They are secure enough within themselves to celebrate your success even if they're not doing as well in their own life. And they will encourage you to keep believing in yourself so that you rise even higher. In the end, I never truly lost a friend, but an enemy was revealed. And to me, rejection is the universe's protection. Whether we realize it or not, everything is in fact working out in our highest good. It's just that we oftentimes don't recognize the blessings in disguise until we look back months or even years later. So if you have someone like this in your life, I really hope that you reconsider whether or not it's actually worth keeping them around. Because if you don't let them go, eventually you'll become exactly who they want you to be. You are someone that deserves to be surrounded by people who love, support, and respect the person that you choose to be in this life. So let go and trust the process.